Ma'am, it says here you were born January 1st, 1908. That would make you 45 years old?
That's right.
Let's cut and reset, please.
Cut and reset.
I actually read Adaline for the first time 5 or 6 years ago. I had years to think about the film and had kind of fallen more and more in love with the story and sat down with them and brought a presentation in and the whole bit and was able to win them over through that process.
He created a mood reel early on, which made us all feel like he had the sensitivity and the artistry to be able to make the film.
You could tell you had a real artist here. And the more I got to know him, I knew he was a gentleman and would be completely prepared.
It's harder and harder to make movies, and I think producers are more often than not looking for a visual guide as to how you're going to treat the film. I knew the touchstones that I wanted to draw from and how I wanted to photograph the film, and there was the period elements should feel like, you know, Roger Deakins when he was doing Doubt or A Serious Man. Some of the contemporary elements had more of a Harris Savides vibe, and that's what I showed Tom and Gary in our first meeting. And I like to think it spoke to the film visually and how it was going to sound, and of course making sure that the costume design was a big part of it, because we're going to see this elegant woman through the course of a century.
I saw a mood reel that Lee had done, and it was so powerful, and I just wanted to jump in that mood reel. I wanted to live in that movie. I wanted to live in that world. I wanted to be a part of it.
Except for the fact that this woman's mitochondrial DNA is not aging in the way that it's designed to. The rest of the film is entirely plausible and maybe makes it seem less like a fantasy and something more appropriate that can shed light in one's own life a little bit better.
It's a movie that is in a genre of what we call magical realism. So the character is real, but something occurs to the character that is magical that really can't happen. We have voiceover that explains how that happens, but it is common in film that sometimes there's a what if, but that's the only magical moment in the film. From that point on, it's really about how she encounters and how she deals with everybody else.
Adaline Bowman will henceforth be immune to the ravages of time.
The voiceover is an important element to the film.
It's something I loved in the script right away because it's this omniscient, godlike perspective who not only has details about our story, but also these anecdotes about the world she lives in that aren't necessarily tied into plot, and also help us as a sort of guide through the many eras in which Adaline travels through.
It uses the history to set the period so that you know that this person has been alive for 100 years.
8 workers and 2 engineers lost their lives when a section of scaffolding fell through a safety net during construction of the Golden Gate Bridge.
The references are very oblique, but still, the costumes that the characters are wearing are absolutely period accurate. The cars are absolutely period accurate. The typefaces on the newspaper.
The mood reel that I made very early on to get the job became a really useful tool. I ended up sending it to all my department heads because it touched on costume design, production design, photography. Claude Perret deserves so much of the credit for the visual style of the film. And this is a guy who, A, understands the kind of size and scope of our movie, but also can really make San Francisco come to life, even though
and you just have to pick those few to do in San Francisco.
To do a San Francisco and Vancouver is always challenging. It's a urban visual that you have to come up with, so that's always like challenging to come up with something that people will register without saying, oh, look, they've put something that people won't question where they are, you know, like the painted curbs in the streets, like the, you know, the cable car and the cabs.
He's a guy who just loves his craft so immensely that he wants to take it to the nth degree. And he also has been doing it so long that he thinks about it the way a filmmaker does.
We really talked about the palette in terms of, you know, warming up the tones of the colors, of the ambiance and everything once Adaline meets Alice in the story. And everything that's previous to that is more like in the cooler tones and not as warm. Then we switched to 1945, which is very active. Lee and I really wanted to make all these period pieces exquisite, like little diamonds, so that they would each have their individual texture and timing, and you know, they would be treated very differently than the rest of the picture. Adaline's apartment is a location we had in Vancouver, and Adaline is meant to live in Chinatown, San Francisco. We emptied the whole apartment that we had there because everything was too clean, too fancy. Removed all the carpets, kept all the hardwood floor. We aged all the walls and the moldings in there as if it hasn't been painted for like 25 years because she travels all the time. She goes away and she comes back. There was lots of sheets on tops of the furniture that she puts on when she leaves to keep the furniture intact.
Adaline's become very much a recluse. She lives a quiet life in an apartment in Chinatown that she's had forever. She boards it up every 10 years and moves.
She basically has kept only the most exquisite pieces of 100 years' life. So it became a very eclectic looking set because it's all like, there's like real Victorian pieces and there's like present day stuff also.
Hello?
Ellis has bought this small industrial building and he's in the midst of renovating it and he does everything by himself.
Your place, it's,
Unfinished?
Yes. I noticed that part is an artistic choice.
So we basically made it like a combination of homemade bookshelves and some very nice fancy furniture that you would have probably bought, but everything was with natural materials, like even his lamps were paper. We used this location in town that was a giant floor, anti-floor, all with wood pillars. All the trusses were just like freshly sandblasted. So we had to embrace it.
Claude was getting caught up on the piece of paper on Alice's desk, and you weren't even really going to see the desk.
When you do a period piece like this, you have to go into extensive research to come up with the exact piece of visual item or artifact that you're going to put in the period vignette that we were doing.
To have a designer who's thinking about all those things was just a real privilege, and we're lucky to have had him.
I met with Tom Rosenberg, and I chose a dress to wear to that meeting that reminded me a lot of a dress that my mom had. It was sort of this dusty blue with these faded white polka dots, and I felt like Adaline when I put it on. Tom told me later, he said, when you walked in, I just said, that's Adaline. So something worked.
Blake does a wonderful job wearing so many different looks in the film, but she came to it with a lot of ideas in terms of how to infuse moments and flourishes into her look. Angus and Blake had to be really in sync on how they were going to pull that off. Blake comes to the film with an incredibly strong sense of style, and not just contemporary style, but the history of style. And to have somebody like Angus, who is a student of that, and Angus was able to craft, I think, incredibly unique looks for the 20s, for the 30s, for the 40s, for the 50s, for the 60s, and then take all those looks from all those different eras and infuse them into a contemporary look for Blake.
1954, I was a junior in college. That's the last photo I have of you.
Oh, well, you've seen one, you've seen them all. Adaline's wardrobe is a way of telling time, in a sense, because from 1908 to now, you really get to see that social shift also, and the hemlines and the shapes and the fits, and that very much tells a story.
This woman had been alive for a century, which means she had a pretty damn good wardrobe. And as Blake said, why wouldn't you wear that? Why wouldn't you wear all those favorite pieces of clothing from the 20s and 30s and 40s and so forth? So the challenge and what we felt was great was to actually incorporate those vintage pieces into her contemporary look. So the contemporary clothes mixed with vintage pieces or vintage accessories gave her an individual look for that time. It was that sort of mixing of styles that sort of made the look of Adaline.
Adaline? Miriam, hello.
My God, you haven't changed a bit.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say.
I think what also Blake was very passionate about was to find a retro feel to all her clothes, to really feel that Adaline was an old soul.
She's a 100-year-old woman, so there's something about her where she's not dressing like someone who's 29, because she's not 29. So we like the fact that she's a little more conservative and not like you see a young woman from San Francisco.
We did use contemporary clothes because she was a woman that was living in the 2000s, so she was buying clothes. But I think we felt she was a woman that bought clothes with a vintage eye, or an eye of the clothes that she was used to and what she grew up in.
A lot of the stuff that I've been wearing throughout the film has been Gucci, so they have been a great supporter.
There were a number of very recent designs which were reminiscent of the 40s and 50s, and she had access to them.
We used that and again mixed them in with other vintage pieces. And that was from a particular collection that they did that had a very 40s, 50s feel. But they were absolutely contemporary.
They were also kind enough to lend us a number of looks from their archive, real original dresses from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s that in many cases were the only ones in existence that Blake wears in the film. So not only is the look 100% authentic, but they're one-of-a-kind pieces that you're not going to see anywhere else. Wow. Because of Blake's relationship with Gucci, Gucci was able to design a dress specifically for Blake. So it's a one-of-a-kind dress that they designed on a body form in Paris with, I think, 48 hours notice, sent it out to us. Of course, it fit Blake perfectly, and we were able to get this one-of-a-kind dress on Blake for the end of the film, which really dazzled.
It's a golden sparkly dress with these beautiful black beaded embellishments. What I liked about that is it's so different from the Adaline that you meet in the beginning with the thick woolly turtleneck and the long skirt and the thick stockings and the grandma shoes and the tight back hair. You know, you get to see her hair loosened up. You get to see the gown is like a little more youthful and sensual.
Between the partnership with Gucci and Angus's work with Blake, the costume design of the film is really extraordinary.
All right, here we go. And set. Just right hand palm of the wheel, and action.
I prepped this film more than I've ever prepped another film. We photo boarded the whole movie. So in other words, my DP and I went to every single location while we were prepping the film and took stills of every single setup we wanted to do in the film.
Lee was very, very thorough in terms of his research. He certainly knew what shots he wanted to have. As a matter of fact, Lee had this armband that he would wear on his left forearm that is like what some NFL quarterbacks wear that have the plays. And Lee had one and he had a shot list on it every day. He introduced us to this wonderful cinematographer, David Lanzenberg, whom he had worked with.
David is somebody who I've now worked with pretty exclusively for the past 5 or 6 years. By the time we get to the photography phase, we're so in sync that, you know, we have a shorthand and almost a code between the two of us.
Feel, you know, more than just the windows.
And I think it was to Tom and Gary and Richard's credit, they really took a leap of faith, both with me and with David, because David hadn't shot a film of this size.
Lee had a very specific idea to bring about the story and the character of Adaline. Through the process, we watched a lot of references to show the different eras and what worked for the beginning and how the contrast plays for the present day. So it was really showed different contrasts without being too cliche either. and really show different eras. Then we looked at a lot of more period pieces, even some stock footage of San Francisco, going back to the early era.
This contemporary setting just gave it such size and scope that I've not had the pleasure of working on before.
We used a red dragon. We used anamorphic lenses as well as spherical. It was a combination of giving it something, a little bit of texture with the anamorphic glass. Prior to her accident, and even after her accident, it's more of a brighter time in her life. Some of the lighting is not as moody as you would see in modern day. We used anamorphic glass for the modern day, and some more of the spherical for the older period pieces. We shot some with some Baltar lenses, as well as for modern day we used the Kawa anamorphic. The idea that it's about moodier really was something that we felt strongly about for the modern day, because she's still moving within the shadows. We don't want to feel the camera or feel the lighting, or we don't want it to give it too much of a character. It's a very exciting project because you really see the possibilities and the different looks that one can establish.
His vision was just so unique and moving. It was incredible.
Background, and 3, 2, 1, action.
We wanted quality in this movie. There's no question about it, and we really achieved that.
It was the film that needed exactly the right actress to make work. The entire film rests on the shoulders of one character.
Blake is a beautiful woman. She's a serious actor, and she has a chameleon-like quality.
I had to play so many different women within one, because any normal woman, from the time they're young to the time they mature into adulthood, they become a different person. Also, depending on what time you come of age, what time you're young in, your manners are different, especially back in the, born in 1908, in the 1920s, women were very much ladies.
That was you clapping, wasn't it?
How did you guess?
You have good manners.
We're the last two. So I had to take that, but also adapt that to modern times, because Adaline had to evolve.
The next time we see each other, I'll have a new identity. I'll always be your mother.
There's not a lot of real estate in the movie between mother and daughter, and we had to establish right away that these two were mother and daughter, and that the woman who looks like she could be Ellen's granddaughter is actually her mother.
Happy birthday, Mama. Thank you, darling.
Conceptually, it's a tough thing to kind of grasp quickly. And for us, a lot of it had to do with the mannerisms in that first lunch meeting that they have together. You'll see Ellen plays it a bit like a child would.
I see you already forgot our little talk about sodium.
No, I am simply choosing to ignore. Whatever Blake and I conjured between us happened in the moment, on the set, in the scene. And I mean, once I
adore her mother, nevertheless.
You know you don't have to still give me cards. I love you.
I love you too. It wasn't intentional, but I found my kind of, oh mother, that kind of thing. And Blake has a kindliness that is very maternal. So I think we developed it. Well, it looks like I'm not the only one getting nostalgic.
You've had such a wonderful life.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Fleming knows that once she goes, her mother's going to be alone. And I think it's really at her insistence that she let go and choose love that, you know, we're able to see Adaline choose that journey.
And if you won't do it for yourself, do it for me. Please. I don't think for anybody it's good to be closed off and so secretive that you're afraid to let anybody into your heart.
We're from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Miss Bowman. We'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
She was very self-protective. She was always afraid of everybody finding out. So my character really kind of made her come to an end of that kind of behavior. Nobody's chasing you anymore.
She had to deny her own child and change her identity, but she did it out of love and out of protection.
You don't have to be alone forever. Don't you miss having someone to love?
She can never share her life with anyone because she will always be left alone. And it's a very painful thing until she meets Ellis.
I'm Alice. Pleasure to meet you.
Alice is somebody who is deeply interested in the past, and Adaline certainly feels connected to the past in a way that few men who look like they're her age would be connected. And so, I mean, I think those two elements right away draw her in.
I'll just wait with you.
Thank you, but I'll manage.
Lee and I were kind of on the same page when it came to like our approach of Ellis. I always thought of him as a guy with great emotional depth and maybe some, you know, some sort of old soul, you know. I also always thought that maybe that's one of the reasons why Adaline and Ellis can connect, because of course she is a 100-something-year-old woman in the body of a 20-something-year-old.
First time I saw you, I knew I had to meet you.
She's always changing where she is and not getting too close to anyone. So to have that person collide with somebody who's so full of energy, like McKeel, the way that he inhabits Ellis, it's magical.
It's not easy for an actor to be Blake Lively's love interest. It really takes somebody with a tremendous presence that you're going to believe, and he's got that.
Before Harrison started, he'd called up and asked if he could shoot his scenes in order. I think in part for performance, but also most of his work was at one location where it didn't become a complete headache for production to do it. And we immediately said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And as a result, we found that, you know, we were able to shoot all of the scenes with the family in the order in which they occur, which gave our family a little time to really get into this house we were shooting in and spend some time together. And because we were all in one real practical house, we didn't build the house on a stage, and because base camp was pretty far away, where normally you call cut and people go back to their trailer, everybody was hanging out in the house. So in between takes, you'd have Amanda Crew, who plays Kiki, and you'd have McKeel, who plays Alice, and Kathy Baker, who plays Kathy, hanging out and, you know, sipping the real coffee that they were supposed to be leaving for props.
Oh, there you are.
Hey, Mom. The first scene we did with my parents is the first scene when I come in and introduce Adaline to them.
Dad, this is
Adaline. The circumstance of my character is that this girl comes and walks in the door, and I look at her, and she looks exactly like she did 45 years ago. You look exactly like this old friend of mine, Adaline Bowman. And she's in the company of my son. I'm being introduced to her for the first time. It's like, what? How can this be possible?
That's my mother.
You're joking. You really?
Yeah.
We were very close. It's about my explaining myself to my wife and to my son and trying to figure out what's going on here.
You should see your face when you talk about her. Are you gonna wax nostalgic this whole goddamn weekend?
Look, It's just that she looks so much like her mother that I'm remembering things that I didn't even know I remembered. I had a sense of what I wanted to do with the character. I didn't want to play him with a bow tie, and play professor. I know who you are, Adeline. It's very complicated textures of personal relationships, and I think it's very clever construction. How is this possible?
I don't know.
We never really see the conversation where Adeline or his dad tells him about that history.
Do you love her?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Because nothing makes sense without her. I always imagined that after the accident, Adeline explains to Ellis kind of what has happened to her, She opens up for the first time in her life, shares her secret with someone. And I just imagine that Ellis would at first be completely shocked, and slowly think, okay, well, I'm still in love with you,
What is it? He knows.
I think it's fun for her at first to experience every decade at her prime. And then when she starts to lose people she loves, or she starts to see people she loves grow older, it becomes quite painful and conflicting to feel like, well, what's it like to never age? It's really about love and loss and what it would be like to live forever. Is that really a gift or is it a curse?
I think Adeline's story here proves us that we don't want to live forever.
I already have.
I probably would like to live a little longer than I'm going to, but forever sounds too long.
I don't think anybody wants to live forever.
Well, I'm going to try or I'm going to die in the attempt.
I could imagine being a 31-year-old and staying that same age. But the lesson to this is that that actually isn't a good thing. I think there's something in that idea that's a big idea, because it's an ironic idea. You think you've got the perfect time, the perfect place, and you'll never age, and that's the greatest thing that could ever happen to you. But actually, when you squint at it, you realize, it's not so good.
Well, it's not the same when there's no growing old together. Without that love, it's just heartbreak.
There's something about the finite, the little tiny blink of a moment that we're here that makes it so incredibly special. You got to make the most of every day. And with Adeline, it's a unique opportunity to see a story where the finite nature of our life is put under the microscope, and you get to see the beauty in having this little window of time.
That's why you left. That's why you disappeared.
When I walk away from it, I think, wow, life happens exactly how it's supposed to. Because if you were to stay alive forever, and you were to lose everyone that you love around you, and you were to see time change around you, and different wars and different successes, it would be very alienating. So it's nice to have that life surrounded by the people you love, and to get to come and go with them.
All these years, you've lived, but you've never had a life.
I don't know how. Tell me something I can hold on to forever and never let go.
Let go.
I'm just tired of running.
Adeline!
Then stop.